Hi everyone, welcome to my channel, Math Made Easy with Terry in 10 minutes. Okay, so we're gonna go straight to translation of graph. Please don't forget to review previous videos. And if you've not liked, subscribe or share, I don't know what you're waiting for. And if there are some topics that you're struggling and you want me to make video on, you can put it in the comment section and I'm gonna respond to you. Okay, so just a quick reminder. So when we talk about translation, we're just talking about this is a form of transformation of graph that involve moving of the graph. So because I know that some of us we do take notes from this video, so I'm going to be writing it down so that it will be easy for you to see. So so we call it, when we talk about translation, okay? So translations are transformations. So there any form of transformation of a graph that moves the graph. So you could either move it to the left, to the right, or up or down. Okay? So these are transformations that moves the graph. So you can either go to the left, so you can move the graph to the left, you can move the graph to the right, you can move the graph up, or you can move the graph down. So there are different types of transformation. And also, please, because of this is gonna be a very big topic, I'm gonna have a very big long time as well. So just heads up, it's gonna be a long video, but it will be worth your while. So please get your notes, your paper, and as we go, I'm gonna be writing the steps, the rules to take note of, so that when you go back at the end of this session, you will be able to understand how to answer questions relating to translation of a graph. Okay, so regardless of the type of translation, the changes that happens to a graph on the x-axis or the y-axis is always written in the column vector form. Okay, so usually write it like this, A and B. So that does that make sense? So that means A are the changes that happens in the x direction. Okay. Okay, so the changes that happen in the x direction, while B refers to the changes in the y direction. So what I'm trying to say here is that, for instance, let's assume we have this graph, okay? And let's assume this graph underwent a translation, and then the graph is here, okay? Now, if you look at this point, for instance, let's pick one point just to explain. Let's assume this point here, okay? So this point here has an x and y. Now this point now has moved from this point here, has moved to this point here. So let's call it x1 and y1. So what we are saying, the changes from x to x1 in the x direction is the A, and the changes from y to y1 is the B, okay? So that means regardless of the type of translation, the changes in the graph or the function along the x-axis and the y-axis is always written in the vector form. Is that okay? And now this will now lead me straight to the general form of translation. So when we have a translation of graph, the general form, I'm going to write it here. The general form of a translation of graph is y is equal to f of x. So the f of x, this is a general form. It could be a cubic function, it could be a quadratic function, it could be a linear function, regardless, okay? Now, this function is going to undergo or a translation, A and B. So A is the changes in the x, B is the changes in the y. So it's going to undergo a translation. And after it undergoes this translation, it's going to make a new function, which is going to be y is equal to f. Now, please look carefully here. So it's going to be f x minus this A in bracket. Are you seeing it? Plus this B in bracket. So you have a general function, okay? You have a function, and now this function will undergo a translation, A and B, and it's going to be the A, it will be what? X minus, the A is going to be in bracket, and plus the B is going to be in bracket, okay? So where A is equal to translation. So remember I told you in the previous that the A represents the changes in the X direction, while B means the changes in the Y direction. So that means A is then a translation in the positive or negative X direction. So that means these are changes that happens either to the left or right, okay? So that means the A here tells you the changes that happens either to the left or to the right. Now, while B is equal to the B that you have here is going to be the translation in the positive. So the translation in the positive or negative Y direction. Are you seeing it? So now the A is in the X direction, while the B is in the Y direction. So it either means it goes up or down. Okay? So if it's positive, it means it's gone up. If it's negative, it's gone down. If it's positive, it's gone to the right. If it's negative, it has gone to the left. Okay? Now, this is the general form. So there are some key things I want you to keep in mind about the general form. Okay? There are some key things I want you to keep in mind, and I'm going to write it. So there are 3 things to note. So it's going to be the 3 rules to note, okay, about the general form. 3 things to note about the general form. So 3 things to note about the general form, okay? So we've talked about the general form, that if you have a particular function, the A, if it undergoes the translation with A and B, the A is going to be X minus A. The A is going to be in bracket. Please take note, the bracket is very important. And plus, what? Bracket of the B, so the B you have here. So there are things to note here. Now, the first thing is that I'm going to start with the changes with A, okay? How does A affect the general form, okay? So the first thing I'm going to talk about is the changes in the X direction. So the changes in the X direction. So that means I'm referring to A, all right? So remember I told you it's about changes in the X direction. That is A, okay? So when you want to solve questions with translation that talks about changes in the X direction, there are 2 possible answers you could get. A could be greater than 0. So that means the answer you could get here could be positive. All right. Now, when it's positive, what does that mean? Now, this means that, okay, it means that the graph of f of x, okay, it means that the graph of f of x is translated by a units, okay, in the positive. So that means when you solve and you notice the a is greater than 0, what it means is that the graph that you're talking about, it could be any form of graph, is translated by a unit in the positive. Okay? Keyword here is positive, x direction. So that means for it to be translated in positive x direction, it means that the graph have moved to the right. Is that okay? So when you solve and your a is greater than 0, it means that the function has moved what? By a unit in the positive x direction. So what I'm trying to say is that when you have y is equal to f of x, okay? We are undergoing the translation of a, okay? Now the B, I'm not talking about the B yet. I'm just focusing on A now, okay? So by translation, Now, what will happen? The y will be equal to f. Now, a is positive, so it's going to be x minus positive a. Are you seeing it? Plus, now I've not talked about the b, right? I'm going to talk about the b later, all right? So this is the translated form for this when a is positive. Now, some textbook can break it down. So because of this, we can open this bracket here. It will become y is equal to f of x minus times plus will give us what? Minus a plus, we've not talked about the b yet. Is that okay? I'll talk about the b later. But you can see that when a is positive, in the bracket here, you're going to put positive a. Or if you want to expand the bracket, it's going to be x minus a. Is that okay? Now, what does this imply? Now, this implies now that the graph has moved by a unit in the positive x direction. So let's pick an example here. So that means if we have this kind of graph here, let's call this is the graph of y is equal to f of x. Okay? Now, this graph is undergoing a what? A translation now. Are you seeing it? So undergoing a translation. And the translation is a unit, positive a, because a is positive. So I'm talking about the b yet. I'll talk about b later. Now it's undergoing a positive a. What does that mean? Is that if you have the graph, it's going to move from here and it's going to move to this point here. By what? A factor of what? A unit, not a factor equivalent to a unit. So if, for instance, if a is 2, the distance is going to move from here to here will be what? 2. Is that okay? If a was 5, the movement is going to move from here to here is going to be 5. And this is the first thing to take note. Now, the second part is that there could be also changes in the x direction, but in this time, a might be less than 0, okay? A might be less than 0. So let's look at that, for instance. What about if we have a less than 0? What does this imply? Now, when you have a less than 0, it means, now in this case now, a is not positive. Now, a is what? Negative. So it means the graph, okay, it means that the graph of f of x is translated let me move this a bit. Is translated by a unit, okay? The same thing. Translated means moving, okay, by a unit, but in the negative. In the negative x direction. Okay? So that means for the negative x direction, it means it's going to the left. So the negative x direction means it's going to the left, okay? All right. So if you look at the previous one we saw, it was going to the right because a was positive, okay? Now, in this case, it's going to go to the left because a is what? Negative. So that means if you're going to write it in the translated form, so a particular graph, f of x, now this graph is going to undergo a translation. Now, translation. Now, in this case, a is what? Negative. Are you seeing it? Now, b, we've not talked about b yet, okay? In the previous one, a was positive. Now, a is negative, all right? Now, a is negative, so we have to go back. Remember, in the general translated form, the a now that is going to be in this bracket is going to be negative, not positive, okay? Because a is less than 0. So we're going to write it now. So it's going to be y will be equal to f of what? Now, x. So remember in the general form, always, you have minus, always. There's minus here, all right? So we're going to have minus, but in this case, A is going to be what? Negative. Are you seeing it? Plus the B. I've not talked about the B yet. All right. So this is the answer for it. But in some textbook, you can break this down. They try to simplify it. Minus times minus will give you what? Plus. Are you seeing it? So you can write it either this way or this way. It's the same thing. But what you need to know is that similarly, if you looked at the previous example where we had the graph was moving to the right by A units, but this time the graph is going to move to the left. So if we pick an example, that same example, so let's assume we have this graph here. Now this graph, let's call the graph the y is equal to f of x graph. Now the graph is undergoing a translation of minus A. Now the B, I've not talked about the B yet. I'll talk about the B soon. Now it's undergoing a translation. Okay. Now, when it's undergoing a translation, what will happen is that it's going to move what? From here, it's going to move to the left. Are you seeing it? So it's going to move to the left by what? A. Are you seeing it? So the minus we're talking about is the minus in the bracket. Please don't forget that. There's a minus in the bracket. Okay? So it's going to move by A units to the left. So when A is positive, the graph will move to the right. And when A is negative, the graph is going to move what? To the left. All right? Okay. All right. So let's talk about changes number 2 now. Okay. So number 1, I talked about changes in the X direction. So now I'm going to talk about what happens when there are changes in the Y direction. So let's talk about B now. Okay. Let's talk about B. So we have changes in the Y direction. So when we talk about changes in the Y direction, what we are referring to, we're referring to the what? The B. Okay. Take this back. Okay. We're referring to B. So what happens with changes in the Y direction? Okay. So what we talked about earlier, changes in the X direction. Now we're talking about changes in the what? In the Y direction. And remember, in the Y direction, we're referring to B. So that means B can be greater than 0 as well, like A, or it could be less than 0. All right, let's start with the first one, B greater than 0. Okay, so from this now, we could say when A is greater than 0, it means it's going to the right. Are you seeing it? And when A is less than 0, it means the graph is going to be translated to the what? To the left. Okay, that is the take-home message for these ones. All right. So let's see when B is greater than 0. When you solve this, or when you're solving and you put it in the general translated form, and you notice your B is greater than 0, it means the graph of f of x is translated by B units. Okay, it's translated by B unit in the positive. Okay, in the positive Y direction. So that means it's going up. Does that make sense? So when B is greater than 0, it means the graph is going to move up. All right? So when you solve it, B is greater than 0, that means the graph is going to move up. Now, because I've done A now, so I'm going to be combining A and B. Okay, so that means I'm going to give you the when A is positive and B is positive, and when A is negative and B is positive. Okay, so I'm going to be combining what we talked about in the changes in the X direction, and I'm going to combine it with this. Okay, so let's crack it up. So we're going to have y is equal to f of x. We have a particular function. Now this function is going to undergo a translation now. So now, in this case, A could be positive and B is also what? Positive. So remember, we talked about A is positive, means that A is greater than what? 0. And when A is greater than 0, it means the graph is translated to the right. So in this case now, A is positive and B is positive. So this is the translation, right? It's undergoing a translation. So that means when we go to the general form, the A we're having in this bracket is positive, and the B we're going to have in this bracket is what? Positive. So let's rewrite it now. So we're going to have y is equal to f into brackets x minus the A we're having here is positive. Are you seeing it? Plus the B we're having here is also what? Positive. Or some textbook will open the bracket for you or try to simplify, and you have y is equal to f x minus times plus will give you minus a. Let me write this clearer. Okay, f, we have x minus times plus will give you minus a, and plus times plus will give you plus b. So you can write it like this. But the reason I prefer to write it in a general translated form so that it will be easy for me to explain. All right, good. So we have that now. So the same thing, we're going to move forward now. Let us see how the graph, similar to what we did with when A is less than 0, let us see how the graph will look like. So in this case, we're having a graph, a particular graph. Let's call the same graph y is equal to f of x. So we have a particular graph like this. This is the graph. So y is equal to f of x, any particular graph, okay? And now this particular graph is undergoing a translation. A is positive and what? B is positive. Are you seeing it? It's undergoing translation. A is positive and B is positive. Now, what do you notice here? So first, we have this graph. Now, A is positive. If you remember, when A is positive, it means that the graph is going to move to the right. So that means the graph is going to move to the right. For A is positive and B is positive. So what I'm going to do, maybe I can break it down a bit so that you understand. So that means for A is positive, so it means the graph has moved to the right first, like this. So the graph has moved to the right here by A. Also, but B is also positive. So that means it's going to move to the right. Now, when it got into this right position, it's going to move what? It's going to move up. So it moved to the right by A, and it's going to move up by what? B. So you can see, so when A is positive and B is positive, it means it moved to the right and up. Okay? So that means the final graph you're going to have is going to be here. This will be the new graph for that. So the graph that initially was here, okay, is going to move to the right by A unit and then move what? Up. And this is what you have. Also, it's also possible that when B is also greater than 0, A could be negative. Okay? So it's also possible that you could have B could be greater than 0 and A is negative. So that means we could have y is equal to f of x. Now, this particular graph, it will be undergoing a translation, okay? You're going to be undergoing a translation. But in this translation here, A is going to be negative and B is what? Positive. Because the last one we talked about, A is positive and B is positive. So it's also possible that you could have this, A is negative and B is positive, and it's still undergoing a what? A translation. Okay, so the same thing. Now, if you go to the general form, so it means that the A you're going to have in this bracket is going to be negative, and the B you're going to have here is going to be what? Positive, okay? So we go back. We'll put it in the translated form. So that'll be y will be equal to fx minus, so the a in the bracket is going to be negative, plus the b in the bracket is going to still be what? Positive. Are you seeing it? Because a is negative and b is positive. Now, like I said, some textbook might want to simplify this. So you see things like this in the textbook. So basically what they did, minus times minus will give you what? Plus. So it's going to be plus a. Then plus times plus will give you plus b, okay? So basically in the translated form, I prefer this translated form because it's easier to explain to students, all right? So let's pick a graph now. So the same thing, we have a graph. This is the graph we have, okay? So let's call this is a y is equal to f of x. So it could be any graph. Now this graph is undergoing a what? A translation by minus a and b. Are you seeing it? And it's a translation. Okay, so what will happen first? Let's start with minus a. So like I told you before, when a is less than 0, it means it's going to the left, right? So when a is less than 0, it means it's going to the left. So that means the first thing you notice for this graph is going to first move to the left. So it's in the middle here. So it's going to move from here. It's going to move to the left first. So it's going to move to the left by what? A unit. Now, after moving to the left, the next thing it's going to do is that because B is also positive, it's going to move up. So it moves to the left by A and it's going to move up by B. Are you seeing it? So it's going to move up by B and move to the left by what? A. So this graph is going to move and be somewhere here. Okay? And that is it. So that means for when A is negative and B is positive, the graph is going to move to the left and up. Okay? So when A is negative, B is positive, the graph is going to move to the left and up. All right, so that is that for that. We've talked about when B is greater than 0, all right? So now let me go to the next one. What about when B is less than 0, okay? So what about when B is less than 0? So let's go to the next one. That will be the next one, B less than 0. Okay, so we have B less than 0. So when B is less than 0, what does this mean? Okay, when you have B less than 0, definitely, we've talked about greater than 0. And from greater than 0, you can see it means that the graph is going up. So that means definitely when it's less than 0, definitely you should be expecting the graph is going what? Down. Okay, so that this means the graph, okay, of f of x, so any particular function, will be translated or is translated by b units in the negative y direction. Okay, so that means it's going down. All right, so it's the negative y. So what are we saying here? So when you have a b less than 0, it means that the translation for that is going to go what? Down in the y direction. So it's possible that A could be positive and B negative, or A is positive, negative, and B negative, okay? So we're going to do both of them. So that means y will be equal to f of x. Now, we're going to start with the first one. So A could be positive and B negative. Are you seeing it? And this is undergoing a translation. Now it's undergoing a translation. So if you go to the general form, so that means A here is positive, but the B here is what? Negative. Are you seeing it? So we're going to put that now. So it's going to give us y is equal to f in bracket x. The A is positive, so we have positive A, okay? and the B is what? Negative. So this is the translated form. Now, or some textbook will want to simplify that. So you can put it as y is equal to f x minus times plus will give you what? Minus a. Then plus times minus will give you what? Minus what? B. Are you seeing it? So that is it. So this is a translation for when A is positive and B is negative. Now, we can also try to draw the graph and see how it will affect the graph for this. So if you have a particular graph, let's call this y is equal to f of x, okay? Now this particular graph now is undergoing a translation of A positive and B negative. Are you seeing it? And it's undergoing a translation. Now what you notice is this particular graph at first, A is positive. So remember I told you when A is positive, it means it's going to the what? It's going to the right. The graph will move to the right, right? So let's go back. So that means this particular graph we have here is going to move to the right first. By what? A unit. Are you seeing it? It's moving to the right by A unit. So it's moved from the middle here, from the center or the origin. It's going to move to the right. Also, but we also have B negative, and B negative means that it's going to move what? Down. So that means the graph as well, from the point it is here, is going to move what? Down. Are you seeing it? So that means it's moved to the right by A, and it moved down to this point by what? B. So that means when you have positive A and minus B, it means that the graph moved to the right and down. Okay, it means that the graph moved to the right and down. Also, it's also possible that we have negative, A is negative, and also B is negative. So it's also possible that A is negative and B is negative. All right. Okay. So if we have something like that, we have A is negative and B negative. What does that imply? So we have y is equal to f of x. Now, this time is going through a translation, but A is negative and also B is also negative at the same time. So translation. Now, if you go back to the general form we talked about, so that means A in the bracket here is negative, and B in this bracket here is also what? Negative. So if you do that now, so we're going to have y will be equal to f of x minus the A here in the bracket is negative, and the B in the bracket is also what? Negative. Or you can simplify it. Will be y will be equal to f x minus times minus will give you what? Plus A, plus times minus will give you minus what? B. Okay, so you can put it in this form as well. So how will this affect the graph? So the same thing. We have a particular graph here. Okay, let's call this graph y is equal to f of x. Now, this particular graph is undergoing a translation of minus A minus B. Okay, undergoing a translation. So what happened? Minus A, it means that the graph is going to move to the left. Are you seeing it? By A unit. Are you seeing it? It's going to move to the left by A unit. And after moving to the left, it's going to come down by what? B unit. So we're going to have a graph like this. It's come to the left, but it's going to also move down by what? B unit. So now you can say it moved to the left by A unit, and it came down by what? B unit. So this is how the graph, the final graph you'll be expecting, will look like. So it went to the left and also went down. So you can now say when A is minus and B is minus, what you have is that it's going to move to the what? Left. The graph will translate to the left and down. Okay, so the graph will translate to the left and down. Okay, so we've talked about two things, the changes in the X direction, and we've talked about changes in the Y direction. Now, the third thing to note as well that I want to talk about as well is the changes in the X and Y coordinates, okay? So what happens to the general form with changes in the X and Y coordinates, okay? So that's the third one, changes in the X and Y coordinates. Okay. I know you will say, Terry, I've not solved any question yet. Yes, I need to make some background first, do some groundwork before we start solving. Don't worry, we're going to solve some questions. So we're going to solve some questions, okay? So what am I trying to say? So if what I'm saying here in the changes in the X and Y coordinates, now if you have a particular function here, okay? So let's use the same one we have. Now let's assume it undergoes a translation by positive A and positive B, okay? Translation. Now, after we have this graph, so you can see from this graph, it means it's going to move to the right and up. So the new graph is going to be here. Can you see? We talked about this earlier. Now, what I'm trying to say here is that now we know that this graph is going to change. Now, if you notice, let's pick a particular point. Let's pick this point here. Now, this coordinate here, X and Y, that was in the initial one, is now here, X1 and what? Y1. Are you seeing it? So that means the coordinates it was here before translation is not the same coordinate it is after translation. If you pick another coordinate, let's say we'll pick this one. So let's call this XA and YA. Are you seeing it? Now, when it's translated, you will notice that the point is going to be now is going to be totally different from what it was earlier. So let's call it XB and YB. Okay, so now the question now is, how can we find the new translated form? Okay, so what is the coordinate in the original one and what will be the coordinate in the final one? So that means if, for instance, here was 5 and 4, okay, X was 5, Y was 4, and I went to translation of A and B, what will be the new coordinate here? All right, so in order to do this, it's very simple. There are two things to keep in mind, okay? So you have to make sure that you have the initial coordinates and then you have the translation that in the X direction or the Y direction. So how do you get a new coordinate? So for the X coordinates, okay, what you do, you add A to the original X, okay, to get a new one. Okay, so to get a new coordinates for X, you add A to the original one to give you this one. So that means if we want to do this now, we can then rewrite this one. The new one now is going to be, here is going to be X plus A. Are you seeing it? Now to get a Y coordinates, what you do, you add what? B to Y coordinates. And this, you add B to Y, and it's going to give you Y plus B. Okay? The same thing you can do for this. You add A to XA, so it's going to be XA plus A to get the new X. And you add B to YA, and it's going to give you YA plus B. So basically, what am I trying to say? When you have an X and Y coordinate, is going to undergoing a translation of A and B. Translation. Okay? So what happened? The new coordinate is going to be x plus a will give you the a, and if you have x plus b, is going to give you, sorry, y plus b is going to give you the second one. So y plus b is going to give you the second one. All right. So let's go. Let's start solving now. Let's start going deep down to what we have. But these are the three things to take note of. The first thing, this is the general form. When a particular function is undergoing a translation, it's going to become a, when a is going to be in the bracket and a b in the bracket. So a could be positive, a could be negative, b could be positive, b could be negative. The a is talking about the movement, the one in the bracket, talking about the movement to the positive or negative x direction, while the b is talking about the movement in the positive or negative y direction. And I also talked about the changes in the x direction. So when it's greater than 0, it means it's moving to the right. When it's less than 0, it's moving to the left. And when b is greater than 0, it means it's going up. And when it's less than 0, it means it's coming down. Okay, and also I talked about the changes in the x and the y coordinates. So the x values before translation and the x value after translation. What you basically do, you add a to the x and you add b to the y. All right. So for the last 40 minutes or 30 minutes, I've been talking about how to about the general form. Okay, I'm talking about the general form all this while. So I'm going to also talk about what about if you're not given a general form? What about if you're given the real equation? How do you solve it? So for instance, let's assume you have so instead of us having y is equal to f of x, okay, undergoing a translation of 4 and 5. Does that make sense? And it's going translation, right? So we know that for 4 and 5, it's going to become y is equal to f of x minus, the a here is what? 4. And the b here is what? 5. Does that make sense? What if, instead of having something like this, you are given the real equation? Let's say you are given x squared plus 4x plus 7. And you are asked now to undergo a translation of what? 4 and 5. Okay? Translation. How will you do it? Are you seeing it? For this one, in the general form, it's pretty easy. Okay? You just do the general form equation. Anywhere you see A, you put A. This, you put B. Is that okay? And if you want to basically simplify this further, it will now become y is equal to f of x minus 4 plus 5. Okay? Very easy, the general form. But what about if you were given the real equation itself? Okay, like this, a quadratic equation, or maybe you're given a cubic equation or a linear equation, and you are asked to translate. So how do you go about it? So the first thing, I have 4 steps, okay? I have 4 steps or 4 rules to do this. So I'm going to remove this a bit so I can write. I have 4 rules to do that. So I'm going to write it here. So 4 rules when translating an equation. Okay, 4 rules when translating an equation in standard form. So now, in this case, you are not given the general form, you're given the standard form. How do you translate? Okay, so what I want to do, I'm going to, this is going to be the last rules I'm going to talk. Then we're going to move straight to solve some questions. Then we'll take it up from there. So when you are having the real equation, like for instance, you're given a quadratic equation and you're asked to translate it by 4 units to the right and 5 units upwards, what do? The first thing, you make sure that you write the original equation. So you write the original equation in standard form. Okay, so for example, if you have y is equal to ax squared plus bx plus c, okay, If it's a quadratic, for instance, okay? So you write it in the standard form, ax squared plus bx plus c. If it's a cubic, it'd be ax cubed plus bx squared plus cx plus d. If it's rational function and the rest of it, you just make sure it's in the standard form. Then after you've done that, the next thing, if you're now translating, so if the equation is meant to be translated, if the equation is to be translated by a, b, that is, a is for the changes in the x, b is the changes in the y. And like I told you, a can be positive, b can be positive, a can be negative, b can be negative. Is that okay? So it could be any form. What you do, you replace, how you solve it, you replace all the x with x minus a. And 2, you replace all the y with what? Y minus a. Okay? So just to put it like this, so if you have y is equal to f of x, okay? And it's undergoing the translation of a and b, okay? So undergoing the translation. So what it means is that anywhere you see y, you put y minus b. Are you seeing it? Okay, no y minus, it's y minus b. Yep. Anywhere you see y, you put y minus b. Okay. And anywhere you see x, okay, you put what? X minus a. Okay. So to make it more understandable, or for you to understand it well, I'm going to put the b here in brackets. Okay. So y minus the b. Okay. So because in some cases, this b can be positive or negative. Is that okay? Will be equal to f of x minus a. Like I said, the a can also be positive or negative. So anywhere you see y is y minus b. Anywhere you see x is x minus b. So this is basically similar to the general form. It's just that in this case here, we are just trying to make it easy in steps for you to understand. Then when you're done with that, the step 3, you then expand and simplify to get the new translated form. Okay? Then, after you've gotten the new translated form equation, number 4, you can sketch, if you're asked, you could be asked to sketch the new function, okay? Or sketch a new equation or function, okay? It depends. But this is if you are asked, okay? So if needed. In some cases, you don't need to sketch it. In some cases, you're gonna sketch. And if you've missed my video on how to sketch a graph, please don't forget, you can go to the playlist, search for graphing of functions or sketching of a graph. You will see I showed how to sketch a linear graph, a quadratic graph, a cubic graph, and the rest of it. Is that okay? All right, so loads of talking. All right, let's start solving. All right, so I'm going to pick some examples that we just summarize what we've done. So let's start with this one. Okay, I'm going to pick some examples to make it easy. I have an example here. So let's say we'll pick some exercise now. So number 1, let's say the question said, find a new coordinates of a point. Okay, find a new coordinate of a point 3 and 2, which is on f of x after translation. Okay. So the first translation coordinates we're given was -3 and 4. So we're told to find the new coordinates of this point, which will be on the function after translation. So basically, it's what they are telling us to do is that we have 3 and 2 is undergoing a translation of -3 and what? 4. Are you seeing it? It's undergoing a translation of -3 and 4. Then what will be the new coordinates? So if you go back to what we did, I explained it to you that when you are finding the new coordinates, the first thing to do is that you have to what? Check and add an x coordinate. So when I talked about the changes in the x and y coordinates, I said for the x coordinates, you add a to the x, and for b, changes in the y, you add b to the y. So let's go back. So in this question, the new one is going to be what? 3 plus -3. Are you seeing it? So that's the reason you need to be careful here. Then we also have 2 plus 4. Are you seeing it? Then this is now going to give us plus times minus will give us minus. So it'll be 3 minus 3. And we also have 2 plus 4. And this is going to give us the new coordinate we'll be expecting for this is going to be 0 and what? 6. And that will be the answer for that. Okay, so remember, for this one, you have to ensure if you're getting the new coordinates, you need to get the translated for the changes in a vector form. The A, you add it to the X, and the B, you add it to the what? To the Y. Okay, so we've done that for the first one. So we'll move to the second one. All right, so let's go to another one. So the part 2 now said, if the translation that we had was fx minus 8 plus 3. Now, what will be the coordinates for this? So as you can see from this, remember, in order to get the new translated form, we need to get the A and B. But we can get the A and B from here, okay? Because I told you that the general form, okay, the A is the bracket when there's a minus. The number here in bracket is the A, and this is the what? The B, because it was given to us in the general form of f of x. So that means we can easily do this then. So we can get the A and B from that. So that means in this case, we can write this again as f into bracket x minus 8, are you seeing it? Plus 3. So as you can see from this point here, this is the same thing as this, because minus times plus, are you seeing it? Will give you what? Minus, and plus times plus will give you plus. So this, both of them are exactly the same thing. So that means we can now say our A is equal to what? 8, and our B is equal to what? 3. Then we can write it in the vector form as what? 8 and 3. Then we can now solve the question now. So we have 3 and 2. We'll be undergoing a translation of 8 and 3. Are you seeing it? Then we're going to have, you're going to add 8 to 3. So it's going to be 3 plus 8 to give you the new coordinate for the x. And for the y, it's going to be 2 plus 3. And that will give you 2 plus 3. And then the new coordinates you're going to have is going to be 8 plus 3 is going to give you 11. 2 plus 3 is going to give you what? 5. And that will be the answer for that. Okay? That will be the new coordinates for that. Now let me add maybe 2 more examples on getting the new coordinates just to be sure we understood it. So let's assume we have the same example, all right? But the same example now, we are having an unwanted translation of -7 and 6, okay? So we're asked to find the new coordinates for 3 and 2, -7 and 6. It's going to be exactly the same thing. So we're going to have 3, 2, undergoing the translation of -7 and 6. Translation. Okay, So it's going to be, so you can pause the video and solve it. Then when you're done, come back, press play, and see if you get the same thing. Okay? So we're having 3 plus minus 7. Okay? And we're going to have 2 plus 6. And then the coordinates you should get, so 3 plus times minus will give you minus. So it's going to give you 3 minus 7. And we're going to have 2 plus 6. Are you seeing it? Then 3 minus 7 is going to give us minus 4. And 2 plus 6 is going to give us 8. So the new coordinates you will get after this translation of minus 7 and 6 will be minus 4 and 8. Then the last one, we have 8 and minus 3, the same thing. We have 3 and 2 undergoing a translation, okay? Okay, of 8 and minus 3. So it's going to give us, we have 3 plus 8, and we're going to have 2 plus minus 3. Okay, and that will be 3 plus 8. Now, plus times minus will give us minus, so that'll be 2 minus what? 3. And the answer you're going to get is going to be 11 and what? Minus 1. And that will be the coordinates for that. Okay, so I think we've done enough for finding the new coordinates. Now, I want to pick an example about these 4 rules where you're given a specific function. Okay, you have now been more specific here. How do you go about it? So I want to pick an example for that. So let's have this example. So we have an exercise here. All right, let's solve this. So we're told to translate. So if you are told to translate y is equal to x squared plus 8 by 2 and what? 3. Now you can see in this example, we're translating an equation. So that means we're not just given the general form like this. Now in this case, we're given the real equation and we're asked to translate. So basically, we're told to translate y is equal to x squared plus 8. It's going to undergo a translation of 2 and 3. Okay? We're going to translation of 2 and 3. What is going to be the new equation? All right, so I gave you 4 steps to do this. Okay? Step 1, write the original equation in standard form. So that means y is equal to ax squared plus bx plus c if it's the quadratic. So that means we're going to write this in standard form first. So the step 1, the standard form we have is y is equal to x squared plus 8, or you can say 0x plus 8 in standard form, but it's still the same thing as saying y is equal to x squared plus 8. All right, so make sure it is in standard form. Now, step 2. Now, step 2 now said that if the equation is to be translated AB, replace all the x with x minus a, and the b and the y with y minus b. Is that okay? So let's do that now. So any x minus a, and b, y minus b. So let's go. So we're having y is equal to x squared plus 8. Anywhere you see y, it's going to be y minus 2. So it's going to be y minus 2. Okay? It's equal to, anywhere you see x, it's going to be x minus 3. All squared plus 8. Are you seeing it? So that means you open the bracket, so it's going to be y minus 2 is equal to x minus 3 all squared plus 8. Okay? Now, what does step 3 now say? Step 3 said, then expand and simplify to get the new translated form equation. So we need to expand and what? Simplify for step 3. So let's go to the next page to write step 3. So step 3, to expand and simplify. So what we have here, we have y minus 2. Sorry, it's y minus 3 because the a here, it's a mistake. So a here is 2 and b here is 3. So it's going to be y minus 3. Okay. And this is y minus 3. Okay. And this is going to be x minus 2. Yep. So not the other way around. Okay. So we're going to have that now. So it's going to be y minus 3 is equal to x minus 2 squared plus 8. X minus 2 squared plus 8. We're meant to expand. So y minus 3. This is the same thing as saying x minus 2 plus 8. Now, we open this bracket. X times x will give you x squared. X times this will give you minus 2x. Minus 2 times x will give you minus 2x. Minus 2 will give you plus 4 plus 8. Y minus 3. You simplify, it will be x squared minus 2x. So minus 2x will give you minus 4x plus 4 plus 8. We take minus 3 to the other side, plus 3 will give you y. So the y will be equal to x squared minus 4x plus 4 plus 8 plus 3 will give you what? 15. So because 8 plus 4 is 12. 12 plus 3 will give you what? 15. And that is the new one. Okay? So that means what we are trying to say is that when we have y is equal to the initial one, x squared plus 8, okay, it's undergoing the translation of what? 2 and 3, okay? Translation. The new graph is going to be what? Y will be equal to x squared minus 4x plus 15. Okay, that's step 3. Now, step 4 said you should what? Sketch. Now, what I'm going to do is I've already shown you how to sketch a quadratic graph. For instance, you need to check the size, the shape, the x-intercept, the y-intercept, and the vertex. So I have a video on that, okay? Now, because I don't have the luxury of time here, what I'm going to do, I'm going to use an app to sketch both of them, okay? I'm going to sketch x squared plus 8. I'm going to sketch this so that you can see how the graph moves by what? 2 and 3. Is that okay? So I'm going to sketch both of them so that you can see. So I'm going to share my screen now. Okay. So this is the graph here. So we have the first one we had was x squared plus 8. So we had x squared, okay, plus 8. So you can see this is the graph for x squared plus 8, okay? Then we're told that the new answer we got for the second one, we had x squared. So it's going to be x squared. You had x squared minus 4x plus 15. Okay, so if you look at this graph. Now, the initial one we had was x squared plus 8. If you can zoom in a bit more. Yep. So you can see the blue one was the x squared plus 8. Okay, the blue one was the x squared plus 8. The black one is the x squared minus 4x plus 2. You can see the graph moved what? From this point to this point, which is the A, and the A is what? 2 units. Are you seeing it? So it moved 2 units to the right, and also from this point, it moved up to this point, and you can see it's 1, 2, 3. 3 units to the 3 units upwards. Are you seeing it? So that means the graph we had here, initial graph was x squared plus 8. You underwent a transformation or a translation, 2 units to the left and 3 units what? Upward. And which is also what? exactly what happened or what is consistent with what we're expecting here as well. All right, so that is that for that. So let's pick one more example. Let's see if we can pick one more and solve that and see. So let's say we have this exercise here. Okay, we're told to translate y is equal to x squared plus 5x plus 6 by -1 and 2, okay? In this case now, we're told to translate this by -1 and 2. So let's pick an example here, all right? So let's see. We have a specific function, or we have a quadratic function and they want us to translate. So we're gonna use the same 4 steps like we did the last one. So the first step we're gonna do is that we're told that we need to write down the original equation, okay? We have to write down the original equation first. And after writing that down, then the next thing is that we'll then determine what to do. So let's write down the original equation for that. And we're given that already, so it was easy. So the step 1 is straightforward. So the step 1, y is equal to x squared plus 5x plus 6. Now the second thing to do is that after doing that, we'll have to replace all the x with x minus a and the y with y minus b, okay? So in order not to make the mistake I made the last time, so I'm going to first identify my a, okay? The a here is what? -1, and the b here is what? 2, okay? So we're going to replace all the y's with y minus 2, so it's going to become y is equal to x squared plus 5x plus 6. Anywhere we see y, we replace it with 2. So it's going to be y minus 2 is equal to, anywhere you see x, you replace it with that. So it's going to be x minus -1 all squared plus 5x minus -1 plus 6. Then what do? We open the bracket here. So it's going to be y minus 2 is equal to minus times minus is going to give us what? +1 squared. Are you seeing it? Plus 5 into bracket x minus times minus will give you +1. And we have +6. Okay? And this is the translator. We've broken it down. Okay? Then the next one, step 3, we're told to then expand and simplify to get a new translated form. So we're going to expand now and simplify step 3. So I'm going to open a new one here. So we have step 3. So we're going to have, we had y minus 2 x plus 1 squared. So we have y minus 2 is equal to x plus 1 squared. And we have 5x plus 1 plus 6. So plus 5 x plus 1 plus 6. So we're going to go. So we have y minus 2. Now this is x plus 1 squared means x plus 1, x plus 1 plus 5 into bracket x plus 1 plus 6. So we have y minus 2. X times x will give you x squared. So if you've not, you don't know how to expand bracket, I have a video on expanding brackets in basic algebra series. So please, you can go back and have a look. So we have x times x will give you x squared. X times 1 will give you x. 1 times x will give you x. 1 times 1 will give you 1 plus 5 times x will give you 5x. 5 times 1 will give you 5 plus 6. Okay? Then we have y will be equal to, we'll take 2 to the other side. So it's going to be x squared plus x plus x plus 1 plus 5x plus 5 plus 6 plus 2, because taking this 2 to the other side. Then that will give us x squared plus x will give you 2x. 2x plus 5 will give you what? 7x. Collecting like terms. So 1 plus 6 will give 1 plus 5 will give you 6. 6 plus 6 will give you 12. 12 plus 2 will give you what? 14. And that is it. And that is the answer for that. So that means when we have x squared plus 5x plus 6, so when we have y is equal to x squared plus 5x plus 6, now this graph is undergoing a translation of what? Minus 1, I think it's minus 1 and 2. Minus 1 and 2 is going to be what? This is a translation. The new graph you're going to have is x squared. The new graph you're going to have is going to be, get this back a bit. It's going to be y is going to be equal to x squared plus 7x plus 14. So that means you have this particular graph. It moved 1 unit to the left, and it's going to move 2 units upwards. That is this translation, 1 unit to the left and 2 units upwards. The new graph you're going to get at that position is going to be y is equal to x squared plus 7x plus 14. So let's draw the graph and see if we get exactly the same thing. Okay, so we've done this earlier, so let's do this. So we had the initial graph we had was x squared. Where we had x squared, okay, plus 5x plus 6. So this is the initial graph we have, x squared plus 5x plus 6. So when you sketch the graph, this is the graph you will get, okay? But, all right, it has undergone a translation, and the new one we had was x squared plus 7x plus 14. Are you seeing it? So the 7x plus 14, you can see that at this point, if you look at this point here, I've been translated to this point here. Okay, so you can see 2 units from here. The initial one was the red one. It moved 1 unit to the left. So you can see from this point to this point, it moved 1 unit. And also it moved what? From this point to this point by what? 2. So that's the reason why I had to start from that point and explain, okay? And explain. So when you have the A, it's talking about the movement of the graph in the X direction, okay? While the B in the movement of graph in the Y direction. So you can see that means what we had here is consistent and correct. Okay, so let's pick one more example on this one. So we have this exercise here. Now we're told to describe the transformation of f of x to f of x plus 5 minus 4. Okay, so what are they saying? So what they are saying is that we have an y is equal to f of x. Okay, it underwent a translation. Okay, but we don't know what type of translation, but the final answer we got was f of x plus 5 and minus what? 4. What do you think happened there? Okay, so in this case, like I always say, you have to convert this to the standard form. So now this to the standard form will become y will be equal to f of, so I told you they have to be what? Minus. So for this to be minus, that means here must be minus 5. Are you seeing it? And this is b, must be positive. So for this to be positive, b must be negative. So if you open the bracket for this, it's going to give you exactly the same thing here. So if you go, remember I told you about the general form. Yes. So the general form, you can see the x minus, then the value of this is going to be the a, and this is going to be the b. So that means what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to rewrite this now in the general form. So that means this is going to be my a, and this is going to be my b. So that therefore, my a now is going to be -5, and my b is going to be what? -4. And then I can rewrite this now as -5 and -4. So with this now, I can describe this. So it means that the graph, because we are having -5, so it moves 5 units to the left. So the graph is translated 5 units to the left. Are you seeing it? Because we have -5 is moving to the left, or you can say negative x direction. So you don't want to say the left, you can say negative x direction. Okay? And 4 units downwards. So because we're having -4, it means it's going downwards. Okay, so it's 4 units downwards. Or you can say negative y direction. Okay, so therefore we can now say the translation, the real translation that occurred here is what? -5 and -4. Okay, so that means it translated 5 units to the left, which is the negative x direction, and 4 units downward, which is the negative what? Y direction. Okay, so basically what you can have, there are several ways you can be asked questions relating to this. So that means you can have the original equation. Okay, and I'm going to translation of A and B, and it's going to give you a transformed or a translated equation. So that means there's several ways you can be asked. You can have the original question. So what we've been doing, I'll give you the original question, and I gave you the translated column vector, and I asked you what is the new one. That's what we've been doing for all this time. The last question was I gave the original one, and I gave you the translated one, and I asked you to find the A and B. So there are several ways you could be asked. So you could play around with different types of question format, okay? All right. So we're going to solve, I'll give you some examples to try now. So you just pause the video and make sure you solve these questions. Okay, can we try this question? Can you just, let's just, for me to be sure you understood. So can we just try this question? So what I want you to do is that I want you to pause the video, okay? After I've written this question, can you just try this? So we have y is equal to tan x, okay? And it's translated by 5 and 4. Okay, what will be the new translated form? Number 2, we have y is equal to x squared plus 4, and it's translated by -2 and 1. Then the next one is we have y is equal to f of x, which is a general form, but it's translated by 3 and 2. So that is, you can see, I've given the original form, and I've given you the column vector, okay? And I want you to give me the translated equation. Is that all right? So I want you to pause the video, spend like 5-6 minutes and try and solve this, then come back, press play, and see if you got the answer, okay? All right, so I'm going to solve it now just to be sure, so that you can be sure that you got that. So the first one I have y is equal to what? Tan x, and it's translated by 5 and what? 4. So anywhere you see, you're going to replace the y with y minus 4, and it's going to be tan x minus 5, okay? Following the rules, and that will give us y will be equal to tan x minus 5 plus 4, okay? And that will be the answer for that, okay? I'm not going to go into double angles and all that advanced trick. I'm going to talk about that later because I don't want to muddle the water here. So I'm going to just stop here, okay? Then number 2. Okay, we're going to have another one. So let's say we have y. We're told that we have, let's pick another example. Which one? So let's say number 2, we have y is equal to x squared plus 4 by minus 2, 1. Okay, minus 2, 1. So the same thing. Anywhere you see y, you replace it with y minus b. Anywhere you see x, replace it with x minus b. So it's going to give you y minus 1 is equal to x minus, but we have minus 2 squared plus 4. It's going to give us y minus 1 is equal to x plus 2 squared plus 4. Y minus 1 is equal to x plus 2, x plus 2 plus 4. Then become y minus 1 is equal to x times x will give you x squared plus 2x. 2 times x will give you 2x. 2 times 2 will give you 4 plus 4. You take 1 to the other side, so y will be equal to x squared plus 2x plus 2x plus 4 plus 4 plus 1. And y will be equal to x squared. 2x plus 2x is going to give us 4x, okay? 4 plus 4 will give us 8. 8 plus 1 will give us what? 9. Okay, so this is going to be the new translated form when you do this. Then number 3, all right? The previous one we had was y is equal to f of x, okay? So we have y is equal to f of x, and it's translated by 3 and 2, okay? The same thing. Anywhere you see y, you replace it with that. It will be y minus 2 is equal to f x minus what? 3. You take minus 2 to the other side, then y will be equal to f of x minus 3 plus what? 2. Okay, and that is the answer for that. So just check and just be sure you got the right answer like I got here. Good. Now, let's make it a little bit more interesting now, okay? Let's make it a little bit more interesting. Now, if we have, for instance, I'm giving you a particular quadratic equation, let's say y, okay? I'm just saying something from my head now, 5x plus 6, and I told you that it was translated, okay? And it gave me y is equal to 2x squared plus 6x plus 7, something like this. And I want you to find the a and b, okay? In the previous examples we've been solving, I've given you the original one, and I gave you the a and b, and I told you to find me the translated form, okay? But now, what I want to do now, I'm going to give you the original one. I'm going to give you the translated one in the quadratic equation, and I want you to find the what? The a and b, okay? That's the next concept we're going to talk about now, okay? So how do you go about it? I have the original quadratic equation. I have the final quadratic equation. How do I find what? The a and b. So let's get into it. So how do you do it? So I'm going to write the 6 rules when describing, okay? When describing translation between 2 quadratic equations. Okay? So now in this case, I have 2 quadratic equations, and I'm looking for the a and b, okay? I want to describe it. So number 1, the first thing to do, when you have something like this, the first thing you have to do is that you have to write the original equation using the completing the square form. So it's very important that you go back and review. I have a video series on this. So where I talked about the complete the square form, how to do it. And I have when A is equal to 1 for complete the square, when A is not equal to 1, I'm using the formula method. So I explained so many of, I've explained this into details and exhaustively as well. So please, if you don't know how to do complete the square, please, this is a good time. Pause the video, go to the playlist and just select and search for complete the square method, and you can play around with it and make sure you can do it. All right, so the first thing you have to do is that you have to write the original equation. Okay, so you have to write the original equation in complete the square form. Okay, so to complete the square form. And remember, complete the square form is x, you could have plus a minus a, so it's plus or minus a squared, and you can have plus b minus b. Is that making sense? So that means you can have x plus a squared plus b, or you could have x minus a squared minus b, or in any of this form. So I showed you how to do this, okay? Number 2, so that means if you remember, just to put it, we have the original equation, okay? We have the original, okay? Undergoing translation to give us a translated form, okay? And we're looking for the A and B. So what we are saying, the original one, write it in the complete the square form. Then number 2, so you write the transformed form or the translated form or translated equation. So now we're talking about the second one now, okay? So write the translated equation for translated equation in complete the square form as well. Okay? So that means it's gonna give us x plus or minus c squared plus or minus d. So what I'm doing is that I'm trying to differentiate the original one from the translated one. So the answer you get is going to look like this, okay? And the answer for the original, just to separate both of them, okay? Number 3, when you've done that, then you have to rewrite step 1 in the general translated form, okay? So remember the general translated form, I told you that immediately after x, you must have minus. So if you go back to the general translated form, I told you that you have minus after the x. Are you seeing it? So the same thing, we're going to do this as well. We'll do this as well. So we're going to rewrite step 1 in the general translated form. So we're going to rewrite step 1 in the general translated form. Okay, so we have x plus or minus a squared plus or minus b. Now this is going to undergo a translation. Okay, so the translated form. Okay, now we must have x minus, right? Now for this to be minus, so it means that the sign has to change. So if this was positive, it has to be negative, because of minus times minus will give us what? Positive. And if this was negative, it has to be positive. So minus times positive will give us minus a. Are you seeing it? Squared plus, same thing, we're gonna say have plus or minus what? B. So you've seen it, we've written it in the what? Translated form. Don't worry, I'm gonna pick an example and explain. So we have this, you're gonna rewrite this in a translated form. You do the same thing now for the next one. For the translated equation as well. So this is for the original equation. Okay. So we're gonna rewrite step 2 now, which is the translated equation in the complete square form as well. So we're going to rewrite step 2 in the general translated form equation. So get this here. I'm going to write step 2 in the general translated form equation. Okay, so the same thing. We had x plus or minus c squared plus or minus d. So it's going to undergo the translated form. Okay, so it's going to give us x. So here has to be minus. So in this case, for this to be plus, it has to be minus. And for this to be minus, this has to be plus. Are you seeing it? C squared. Okay. Then plus. Then you have plus or minus what? D. Then after you've done with that, now to get the translated coordinates, so to get A and B, okay, to get the translated coordinates, okay, so translated coordinate, that means we're talking about A and B. Is that making sense? So the first one, the A, which represent the X coordinates, okay, how do you get it? What you do is the answer you get from this point here, the answer you get, the value you have in this bracket, so is the minus plus C. The answer you get is value. Then the answer you get there, you then have to subtract it from the answer you get here. So it's going to be this minus plus A. The answer you get is going to give you the A. And for the B, which is the Y coordinates, will be the answer you get here, which is plus or minus, any answer you get there, is it plus D, minus D, it does not matter, minus the answer you get here, which is going to be plus or minus what? B. Then when you've gotten the A and B, then step 6, you then write it. You now write in the column vector form. So it's going to be what? A, B. Okay. So now I know you'll be asking, oh, Terry, I don't understand. This is getting confusing. Don't worry. Let's solve an example. An example is going to bring it out now. Okay. So let's solve an example. So I have an example here. So let me get this out so it will be easy to write. So we're told to describe. Okay. So number 1, we're told describe the transformation. Okay, in the function. Or describe the transformation in the following function. Let's make it so we can add several at the same time. Okay, so in the following function. So you're told to describe functions given below. Okay, so we're told to describe the transformation of the following function given below. So let's say we have, let's start with the first one. Let's say we have x squared to x plus 2 squared minus 8. Okay, we're asked to describe the transformation. So that means what they are saying is that we had x squared, it underwent a translation, okay? and it has an A and B, which we don't know. And finally, at the end of the day, we had x plus 2 squared minus 8. We're now told to find A and B. Okay, how do you go about it? So follow the steps. So step 1, write the original equation in the completed square form. Okay, so the original equation we had is x squared. So we'll have step 1, x squared in completed square form is going to give us, open the bracket, x plus 0 squared plus 0. Okay? Okay? X squared plus 0 squared plus 0. Please don't forget, you need to go back and review how to do completed square form. Okay? Then step 2. So get this one here so I can have space to write. So step 2. The next one is that we're told then the next equation is to write the transformed translated equation in completed square form. As you can see, it was already written for us already in completed square form. So that means we already have it as x plus 2 squared minus 8. Okay. Now, step 3, we're now told to rewrite step 1 in translated form. So that means we're going to rewrite step 1 in translated form. So step 3, step 1, what was step 1? Is x plus 0 squared plus 0. So we're having x plus 0 squared plus 0. In translated form, remember I told you this has to be minus, so it's going to become x minus. For this to be minus, it's going to be minus 0. Are you seeing it? Squared plus 0. Now, if you look at both of them, they're exactly the same thing. Minus times minus will give you what? Plus, so it's exactly the same thing. Now, step 4, we're meant to do the same thing for the other equation, right? So step 4, we write step 2 as well in the what? General translated form. So step 2, we have x plus 2 squared minus 8. So we have x plus 2 squared, is this minus? Minus 8, minus 8. The same thing in the translated form is going to give us x. This has to be minus. So for this to be plus, this has to be minus 2. Are you seeing it? So for this to be the same thing as this, here has to be minus. So it's going to be minus 2. Then this is plus. So for this to be plus, so that means B has to be what? Minus. Okay? So this is the translated form. Step 5. Step 5, to get the A, okay? To get the coordinates now, to get the A, the answer you have in the bracket minus the answer you have, so that means C minus A, okay? So let's go. So to get the A now, the A is going to give us the answer we have in this bracket here, which is minus 2, minus the answer we have in this bracket here, which is minus 0, and that will give us minus 2 plus 0, and that will give us minus 2. For B, it's going to be the answer we have in this bracket. So if you go back, that's the same thing I said. For B, it's going to be the D, the answer you have in this bracket, minus the answer you have in this bracket. So for D now, it's going to be the answer we have in this bracket, which is minus 8, minus the answer we have in this bracket, which is what? 0. And that will give us minus 8 minus 0, and that will give us minus 8. And step 6, we're told then to write it in the column vector form. So A is what? Minus 2, and B is minus 8. So now we can now describe. So that means for us to move from this point to this point, what really happened is that the translation was minus 2 minus 8. Are you seeing it? Then with this now, we can now describe the translation. This means it's a translation. The translation of the graph of x squared, which is the original one. So that means this graph of x squared was translated 2 units to the left and 8 units downwards to give us this, okay? So that means was translated, the translation of the graph of x squared by 2 units to the left. So you can say 2 units to the left, or you can say negative x direction. So it's the same thing, okay? I know some of you prefer the negative x direction. And 8 units what? Downwards. Which means the what? The negative y direction. Okay? So that means it's a translation of graph of x squared to give you this, to give you negative x direction and negative y direction to give you this. All right? So that was the translation that I called. All right. So what I'm going to do, I'll give you one more example to try. So what I will expect, just pause the video, okay, and tell me the translation that will occur from x squared to x squared plus 4x minus 5, okay? So you can pause the video and see if you can answer the question. And if you do, then come back, press play, and see if you got the same answer like I did. All right, so let's start. So step 1, we have to write it in complete square form. So we have x squared. So it's going to be x plus 0 squared plus 0, okay? That is that. Then for the second one, step 2, in complete square form, you open the bracket, x, you put the sign here, plus, you divide 4 by 2, will give you 2 squared, minus the answer you have here, 2 squared. Then you add this, so that'll be minus 5. Okay, I've solved complete the square a lot. So at this stage, I'm not going to waste so much time on that. So it's expected that you know how to do it. If you don't know how to do complete the square, please, you can pause the video, go to the playlist on complete the square, and watch the videos. I talked about different methods of doing that, and I talked about it exhaustively as well. So at the end of the day, you're going to have x plus 2 squared minus 4 minus 5, and that will give you minus 9. Now, step 3, we then have to convert each of them to complete the square form. So we have, the first one is going to give us, we have x minus, for this to be minus, it's going to be minus 0, all squared plus 0, okay? And that will give us for the first one. Okay, so that is that. Then step 4, okay? We then have to put this in the translated form. So if you go back, step 4, I told you, you need to rewrite step 2 in the translated form, right? So let's do that as well. So we have x plus 2 plus minus 9. So for this to be that, you have to have x minus. Now, but we have plus here. For that to be plus, it has to be minus 2. Are you seeing it? Squared. Then we have plus here. And for this to still remain minus, so b has to be what? Minus 9. So we're done with that. Now, step 5. Okay, step 5. To get the a, are you seeing it? To get the a is equal to, if you remember what I said, the a is the answer from this value here minus the value you get here. Okay, so let's go. So the value we have here is what? Minus 2 minus the value we have here is minus 0, and that will give us minus 2 plus 0, and that is minus 2. To get the b is a value we have here minus the value we have there. So it's going to give us minus 9 minus 0, and that will give us minus 9. Okay? So now step 6, we can now put it in the translated form. So A is -2 and B is minus what? 9. Okay, A is -2 and B is -9. So what we are saying is that when you have x squared, it's going to be translated by -2 minus 9 to give you what? The x squared plus 4x minus 5. And to describe it now, okay, so -2 minus 9, it means that this graph moved 2 units to the left and 9 units downwards, okay? So that means it's a translation, okay? A translation of the graph of x squared, okay? The translation of this graph x squared, because it's going translation of graph x squared by 2 units to the left, okay? Which means the negative x direction. Okay, and 9 units. Because it's -9, means 9 units downwards. Which means the negative what? Y direction. Okay, so I hope this was clear. All right, so I'll just pick one more example for this video and I'll round it up with that. Okay, just one more example, and that will be the last example, I promise. All right, so let's pick one more example. What about if you were told that you had, let's say, x squared minus 6x minus 9 and was translated to x squared plus 2x minus 7, okay? So what I want you to do, the same thing, I want you to pause the video and solve it and try to describe the translation from x squared minus 6x minus 9 to x squared plus 2x minus 7. And when you're done, you can come back and press play and see if you got the same thing I did. All right, so let's go. So the step 1. So remember the step 1? The first thing that is expected that you should do is that you should put it in the translated form, right? In the completed square form. So write the original equation in the completed square form. So basically, what they are saying, this was translated to this. So this is the original equation. So as usual, x minus 6 divided by 2 will give you what? 3 squared minus 3 squared minus 9. Okay? And this is going to give you x minus 3 squared minus 18. And this is the original one. All right? So now step 2, you do complete the square for the second one. Okay? So that's step 2. The translated equation, put it also in complete the square. So we do the same thing. So you're going to have, open the brackets, x plus 2 divided by 2 will give us 1 squared minus 1 squared minus 7. Okay? Then we now have x plus 1 squared minus 1 minus 7 will give you what? Minus 8. Okay? Minus 8. All right? Okay. So we have minus 8 for this one, right? Good. Now step 3, do you remember step 3? The next thing we have to do is that we have to then convert the original one to the translated form. So we have to rewrite step 1 in the translated form. So in the translated form, you must have minus, okay? So let's go. So it's going to be x minus. Now, but we have minus 3 here. So for this to remain minus 3, so it means in the bracket, we're going to have plus 3. Okay, so that means in the bracket, we have plus 3, then squared. So we can see minus times plus will give us minus, so everything is fine. Then we must have plus outside, and this is minus 18. So for it to remain, it's going to give us minus 18 here. Okay. Then the next one, step 4. Okay. Step 4, we're going to rewrite this as well in the translated form, and that will give us x minus, but we have plus here. So for this plus to be there, it has to be minus 1 squared. Then we have plus minus what? 8. So if you open the bracket, it's going to give you exactly the same thing. All right. Then when you're done, step 5, to get A and B. Okay. So step 5, to get A, to get the A, I told you, is the answer from the second one minus the answer from this to give you the A. And for the B is the D minus B. So let's go. So to get the A, which is the x coordinates, so it's going to be the answer from here, which is minus 1 minus the answer we have here, plus 3. Are you seeing it? And that will give us minus 1 minus 3, and that the answer will be minus 4. Then the B is going to be the answer we have here, which is minus 8 minus, okay, the answer we have in here, which is minus 18. And that will give us minus 8 plus 18, and that will give us what? 10. So step 6 now, we can then write it in the column vector. It's going to give us minus 4 and what? 10. Are you seeing it? So that means what we are trying to say now is that when you have x squared minus 6x minus 9, it's undergoing a translation to give you x squared plus 2x minus 7. The translation, the vector form of the translation I'll call there is minus 4 and 10. That was the what? The translation. So now we can now describe this. So that means this is a what? A translation. The translation of the graph of x squared minus 6x minus 9. Now you have minus 4, so that means by 4 units. Okay, by 4 units to the left, because it's minus. And what? You have 10, and that will be what? Positive y direction, 10 units in the positive y direction. And also you can say left, or you can say negative x direction. It's exactly the same thing. So negative x direction and 10 units upward. Okay, which is all the positive what? Y direction. Okay, and that will bring us to the end of this video. Like I said at the beginning, this is a very long video. Now you have enough tools to answer any question about translation. You can go solve questions from the worksheet, solve questions from the textbook, and try as much as possible about translation. All right? Okay, so that is that for that. So I'll go straight to the next video, which will be stretching of a graph. How do you stretch a graph? All right? Like I said, if you have any question or there's a video you want me to do, you can just send me an email or you can drop it in the comments and I'll get back to you. Is that okay? And I'll see you in the next video. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Click the notification bell so when I post the next video, you'll be the first person to know. All right, thank you very much, and I'll see you in the next video. See you soon.